Z Business Ready Facebook Live. And tonight I've got the gorgeous Carolyn Creswells with me from Carman's Fine Food. But before we get started, remember to hit the subscribe button if you'd like to hear from us again, because we will be back in September. So do hit the subscribe button. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about dreams. We've all got them, but we want to know how we're going to make them a reality. What is the connection between dreams, reality and planning? So that's the sort of thing we're going to be talking about tonight. But as you know, we're going to be answering your questions. So before we get started, Carolyn, you and I go way back.
We certainly do, Naomi.
In fact, it's more, I would say it's more than 10 years that we've known each other. I remember the very first time I met you was actually over a similar thing, and you were like, "Hi, I'm Carolyn." I was like, "Hi, I'm Naomi." And we've been friends ever since, and we've both very much been aware of each other's growth stories. But if you were going to pinpoint one thing about your dream to reality, what would it be? What would you really want to share with people of the, "Oh, I didn't think I could," or what have you?
Look, I think overall the main thing is that a lot of people have all of these dreams and all of these ideas, but they just stay that. And I think that my strength has always been thinking, okay, well, there's that idea, but how would I actually make that happen? And to make it happen doesn't have to be enormous. You can just make it happen. And I guess for me that was thinking, you know, I was in this little tiny business and they said I was going to lose my job. So for $1,000 I went, well, all right, I'll just buy this little business and see what would happen. And I get frustrated with friends of mine that sometimes can't just take that next bit and go, look, I'll just give it a go. And so, you know, and I think that that's kind of the difference of an entrepreneur or perhaps just a dreamer.
Yeah. Now, given that you've gone way back to the beginning of time already, the name Carman's is definitely not your name. So, come on, where did it come from?
I get called Carman all the time when I'm walking down the street. So it's the first three letters of Carolyn, and then it was the first three letters of my business partner's name, Munya. So we literally drove to the registration shop and we both, you know, took the first three letters of our names and made up this funny name and stuck.
Oh, that's great. Well, I think it's better to be called Carman than that red lady, which is what I get. Anyway, we're going to go with the question. First of all, how important is patience in your whole journey? Well, that's the point, whole journey. Well, we're still on our journey.
So, I mean, on one side, I'd say I'm not a particularly patient person. So, and I think, you know, a lot of entrepreneurs probably aren't. You know, I want things done. I just did a strength test the other day. I encourage anyone, you can do it. It's a free test, VIA. And my number one strength was zest. And the problem with that is you just chase the next shiny thing and you're always after it. So for me, I have to actually work on patience. And sometimes when we're doing a big push, like at the moment we're doing a huge push into China, I have to be patient about making sure that we do everything properly so that when we launch, it's all correct. So it's something that I work on.
There's a difference, though, between patience and persistence, resilience and relentlessness. So, you know, how do you choose the difference between patience and persistence for a start?
So, to me, persistence is...
Patience implies sitting still for a start.
Yes. So patience is much more, okay, that's all right, and we can do that in a year's time, whereas I'm always saying, well, hang on, come on, let's just try and get this to happen yesterday. Whereas persistence, you know, and listen to me, when these young people, I get frustrated when people go, I got my first no. I said, oh, I got no's all the time. And it was just, well, how do I turn that no into a yes? And I'd go back every 6 months. And sometimes it would take years to turn that no into a yes. So I'm absolutely persistent when it's required. But I do think there's a difference. And like I said, patience is probably not my strongest character trait.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So let's go to the next question. How do you attract resource talent into your business when you're in a startup small business budget? How did you get the first people into Carman Fine Food?
So I think the thing is that don't always think that you have to hire someone full-time or that the first people you hire have to be these super brainiacs. For me, I think that often those people that you can get advice and you can get incredible knowledge from contacts, from networks, from mentors, and then you can, as long as you bring the ideas in, you can then actually have the more junior people help execute. So what I always tried to do was say, hang on, I'll come up with all the ideas, but who's actually going to be doing it? And so, you know, it's a combination of trying to get your gut instinct and to look at what's actually happening in the marketplace and what advice you've been given and toss it all around and go, okay, well, what am I going to execute in the next month, 3 months? And who's actually going to do that? And so I think sometimes people think that the person you need to hire needs to be that person to bring the ideas in. But sometimes the idea is the easier thing rather than the execution.
Yeah, I remember in my early days, what people bought in spades was passion, and it was kind of chaotic, and nobody had a job description, and I would say, oh, I want another person just like you. Have you got a friend? That was kind of our recruitment. But values was very important, who they were and how they worked. And it wasn't until actually down the track that I realised we needed job descriptions and people needing to know what they're doing. I think one of the most important things for me, especially in startup phase, was making sure I knew what the business stood for. Because when you're bringing people in, the why are we here? Why should I work here? Because we can obviously never attract people based on salaries or benefits. It has to be their passion, and there have to be their belief in the sense of purpose. So the one thing that I really was careful about is making sure I knew the vision, what was going to be. And I might have sold a bit of a vision that might not have been there, but I knew that that's where I wanted to go. And effectively, one of the things that I did really wrong in the early days is when people come in to interview, I did all the talking. I'd say, oh, come and work here, it's fabulous, it's really great, you love it, we're doing all of these things. And who was the we? Me and the dog. So, but I definitely had a vision. And one of the things that I actually asked Andrew Banks on the set of Shark Tank about, I said, what about this recruiting thing? What's all that about? And why? And he said, Naomi, what you've got to do is ask them questions about where they see themselves in 5 years' time and what they're... Oh, right, you ask them questions. I said, that's all new news to me. But let's get to the next question. So, Kaiser, how did you enterprise a small business to a large investor? How did you present it? How did you pitch it to an investor?
Well,
have you ever taken an investor?
So I have never taken an investor, and I have to say I feel extremely proud of that. Yeah. So I've just always tried to sell as much as I can, save as much as I can, and use that money for the business to sort of be self-funded. And what I love about that, I've got 4 young kids now, as you know them, and if I want to have 3 months off a year for all the school holidays, I can. I don't have anyone I have to be responsible to in, there's no boss, so to speak. So I encourage anyone, if you're looking at starting a small business, the nirvana is not the angel investor. It's not necessarily someone that's going to come in and put the big chunk of money in, and absolutely look at, in certain businesses they need that, but if you can self-fund, for me that's been a great way to go.
So Kaiser, I'm going to give you a copy of Ready to Soar, because I talk extensively about investors and attracting the right investors. But given that we're talking about dreams tonight, one of the very important things is to make sure there is alignment between the people that you're bringing into your business, whether they're investors, partners, strategic partners, or what have you. So making sure that they also believe. I remember the story with Atlassian, with Scott and Mike, when they were looking at investors, and they were already massive, and they knew that they'd found the right investor, because one of their values is don't F the customer. Yeah. And the investor had created a T-shirt which was all about their culture, because they had T-shirts that they wear, and it had "Don't F the business," and they go, oh my gosh, don't F the entrepreneurs, and they go, oh my gosh, these are the guys. They get our passion, they get our vision, they get our values. They are us. So making sure that you bring an investor in who's going to work with you and have a shared dream is really important, but I'll talk more about that. So Kate has contacted us. Do you have some tips or advice for women entrepreneurs who struggle with work-life balance? Not sure why men wouldn't struggle with work-life balance, because most of the blokes I know are also pulling their hair out. So is this a gender issue?
No. For me, I would say that if there's one thing you would look at me and say, okay, I acknowledge that that's something that she's done well at, I would hope it's a work-life balance. And so the few tips I would have is, when you're at work, really choose how to spend your time. So if someone asks you for $20, you'd say no. If someone comes up to you in the street and asks you for 20 minutes, most people will say yes. And the one thing we're running out of is time. It's not that we're running out of money. And so actually saying, in my work day, am I being as productive as I can? So I don't do coffees ever. I don't do lunches. I come in, I have sort of all the time I can for the people who work at Carman's, but I really avoid any external meetings so that I can get through my stuff, so I can get out the door at the end of the day. I try and make sure I've got no emails in my inbox, and then I can walk in the door at night and actually be present and mindful with my family. Now, you know, I know what it feels like. My dad used to walk in, big glass of red wine, 7 o'clock news, and don't talk to me. And sometimes you might feel like that when you walk in the door, but when you've got a young family, you've just got to walk in and be on and be present because you haven't been there all day to go, okay, how can I connect with you for this last hour and a half or something? So I think it's really about choosing, looking at your week and saying, how am I spending my time? Is this working for me? And really trying to, you know, for me, like, for example, weekends are absolutely family time. And things, you know, were not like that in the early days, but I really have had to really work on it since I've had the kids.
Yeah. You know, the other thing is, as my kids got older, is I made sure they knew where I was and why I was there. So if I couldn't be there, that in the same way as I would share with other people my vision, then I'd also talk to the kids about why was I doing what I was doing. And I did get my children involved with the business very, very early on. I'm sure my son invented many a great experience that we needed to go and research. And I remember saying to their school teachers when they were very young, look, if my son says he's been out in a V8 race on the weekend, he probably has, you know, when he's going on. So I felt that making it, so in other words, instead of trying to have two lives, to have one life. You know, when the kids were little, they thought I ran a balloon company or something, and oh, she must be the party shop. So they, you know, so as they got older, they really understood the business, and they still make suggestions. Was it wrong to have my kids blowing up balloons before they went to school? Anyway, we'll move on. Rania has got a great question for you. How do you take a new product to a large retailer?
You know what, it's the same way that you would take a new product to a small retailer. And people just think because it's Qantas or Woolworths that, oh, how do I approach this? So you've got to work out who's the decision maker, who's the person that can actually make this happen, make the appointment, go on and see them, do the best presentation that you can, and if they say no, say, when's the next presentation, come back again, persistence, and keep presenting. So I think it's just about really being realistic about, is your product ready for that retailer? I think that's the more important question, because some people say, oh, I've just invented this, I don't know, new muesli bar and it's never been on the shelf, and I'm thinking that Woolworths is going to take it straight up. Whereas you've got to start smaller, get the runs on the board, get some sales happening so that you can go in and say, hey, look at how well this has been selling, and then they're much more likely to list it. So, you know, don't just think that the first no is no forever. Just keep plugging away.
I think that's a really great idea. But Rania, I'm going to give you a copy of the book because a whole third of the book is dedicated to pitching. So whether you're pitching for investment or you're pitching for partners or whatever, the same requires. So the requirement is to make sure that you're in their world. And if you understand their business a little bit more, as Carolyn just said, if you're pitching a new muesli bar product and they've got 100 of them, well, where does it belong in the scheme of things, and help them do the work for them? Also know who they are, a little bit about their background in the sense of, have they worked in that organisation for a long time? Have they just come to this category? Have they been in that category for a long time? So that you can speak in their language. Engage them quickly with a story, and then you will get permission to move forward. But great question, and there's a book for you. By the way, if I offer anybody a book, make sure you inbox directly onto the Facebook, ANZ Facebook page. Just send a message with your contact details so that we can send you out a copy. So, Ben Trigger, what are your 3 tips for starting a new business? Buy Ready to Soar.
Buy Ready to Soar.
Watch Facebook Live on ANZ.
So I think the first thing is, so once you've kind of come up with your rough business plan, so it doesn't need to be anything fancy, but it needs to be, does your product need to exist? Are you solving a problem for someone? Where should it be sold? What do you think your pricing should be? Brainstorm, get enough information so you've got your first bit of a plan. And to me, your second bit is to actually do it. And a lot of people go, but that's the hardest bit. And whether that's a food product and taking a stand at a farmer's market on a Saturday morning so you can actually just start selling, whatever that looks like, to actually do the first kind of sales. Don't give up your day job. For me, it's about saying, okay, actually just give this a little bit of a go. And then the third step is to get the feedback. Is this actually working? Is this something that you can tweak, adjust? Is there enough of a, you know, let's be realistic. You're not just trying to sell to your family and friends. Actual consumers out there wanting to hand over their hard-earned money for this. And then that constant evolution. So if you can go through those 3 steps, I think then you really will know if it's got legs or not. Yeah,
I completely agree with you. There's idea and then there's execution. When I'm looking at ideas, and I think this is a process that anybody can go to, is which problem are you solving? But how many have that problem? Where are those people with that problem? What's it going to cost me to access those people with that problem? What are they prepared to pay for? What's it going to cost me to produce? So really some very fundamental questions on just who, how, what. And if you can solve those, that's on the back of a napkin sort of thing. You're kind of getting your way forward. Like you, we didn't take investors into our business. My business partner would always say, if I was to give you $1 million, what would you spend it on? And I knew I was developing a market and it just took time. So in the same way, it's you've actually just got to take the first step. Try, customers are your best investor, customers. So,
Absolutely.
But Ben, great question. I think you need a copy of Ready to Soar, so we'll send it out, but send in your address to the ANZ Facebook page. So Maria, how do you trust wholesalers? Oh, Maria, it's not that I'm asking you the question. So Maria asked us this question. How do you trust wholesalers, and is it best to use local rather than international wholesalers?
So I'm going to say, I'm presuming meaning sort of suppliers. And to me, I would always choose a local supplier, if I could, over an international one. But the reality is that sometimes there might be a special niche that someone has, or there might be a special ingredient that you can't get in Australia, so then you look overseas. But I like to sit down, I like to look someone in the face, I like to be able to think, hang on, are you actually, are we going to have a long-term relationship together? So I think sometimes the people, so for example in packaging, I could save a little bit of money by having it made in China, but then I know that it's a lot slower to get the packaging in, the tweaks aren't there, I don't seem to have that person that is just sitting on the end of the line absolutely sweating over the fact that every run has got to be the right exact shade, and so I sort of feel that sometimes it's part of our brand story being Australian, and it's something that I just really support as much as I can.
Yeah, but when you've gone into new markets, you sell in the UK, don't
Yes.
you? So do you use a wholesaler in the UK? So do you use, in other words, you could choose an Australian wholesaler who exports on your behalf, or you could go into different
markets. So for us, we call that distributors.
Okay.
And so we would generally always go and deal with a distributor in the market, but sometimes there might be an Australian consolidator. In a few markets, we'll consolidate here, but generally speaking, we would always send straight into either the supermarket chain or to the distributor in that market.
Yeah. I'm not in the area of manufacturing, but I do know with some of my Shark Tank businesses like Heggs, they've chosen to manufacture in Australia, and they've selected, as you call, distributors.
Yes.
We call them wholesalers, so that's why we're all talking a different language. But they've chosen distributors in different markets because they already have the relationships. But they go and see them. Business is done by people, and you've got to trust that function. We still back? Hi! Did we miss us? Oh, we're back! We're just having a little chin wag. So Loretta, come on, let's get straight to your question, Loretta. What preparation did you do to take the first step in getting your idea on the market? What preparation did you do? I think it was $5,000.
I know. So for me, it was $1,000 because I actually bought into the little business. But presuming that I hadn't done that, what I would say to other people is that sense of writing that up, and we've been talking about this, the exact stuff you were just talking about is what's the problem I'm solving? Do actual real people out in the real world want to buy this? How much would they really pay for it? And you can't just ask your family and friends. No. And I will often say, even if you can't afford more expensive market research, you might just say, I'm going to write up a little survey, I'm going to give it to 10 friends, and they have to go and ask 10 of their friends. So all of a sudden you're going to get 100 bits of information back, people that don't know you, to say, look, what would I genuinely spend on this? And then that will actually tell you whether business has actually got some legs or not.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Loretta, I'm going to send you a copy of Ready to Soar. Can you inbox this? Because there's a whole third of the book is about preparation and getting ready. And it's on many different levels. There's the business side, which Carolyn spoke, but there's also the emotional part. Am I cut out to be an entrepreneur? Do I want to grow a big business or a small one? What sort of a business do I want to have? Do I want to take a partner? So this will help you answer some of those questions. So that's coming out to you if you send us your address. So let's go to the next question. Anthony Liu has asked, what is your #1 tip for scaling your brand?
So I think that what you want to do is you want to really be tight about what your brand does and what your brand doesn't do. So everything from the name, the tagline, the colour, you are the colour specialist in red, and all of that needs to really be a tight, beautifully executed brand position. Now, that doesn't need to cost a lot of money, but it needs to really look smart. And then once you know what you stand for, it's about trying to get that message out in every way you can, through social media, through your packaging, through everything, every touch point that you've got, that it represents what your brand stands for, and people really get that very quickly. And I think that that's the way, you cannot appeal to everyone. And I think that sometimes people think that their product is going to be able to sell to 25 million Australians, and it's just not going to happen. So know what your niche is, really go after it, and be tight with the execution of what your brand looks like.
Tight with the execution is exactly right. When you've only got a tiny budget, consistency is everything. So you say this, you might get really bored with it. It's the same thing over and over again. I remember you looking larger than life when you only had one product or two products, So making sure that you've got as much shelf space, looking bigger than you can. So even if you're not in every store, making sure that the ones that you are, and you're looking absolutely fabulous. What was hilarious for us, I think, in the early days was, because we were at the beginning of the internet, that when we invested in what they called shopping portals, we were right next to David Jones and Myer and like these really big guys, and they couldn't tell the difference between us as a small brand and a bigger brand. So we got brand gravitas or brand authority by who we hung out with. So we were always trying to be put side by side with bigger brands, which was an interesting way to do it. But let's go to the next question. Talia Jane, how long from when your business was a startup to when it was running a large profit, in your eyes, successful? How long did it take?
And I hate to say this because I know that this always depresses people, but to me, I think there is a bit of a 5-year journey. And I think for the first 5 years, you're really setting yourself up, and you're really getting established, and you're really finding your way. And if you haven't got to the 5-year point where you're making a reasonable profit and the business is quite established, I think that's too long. Now, I understand that this time frame is getting tighter with technology, and that, perhaps now it can be reduced down to 3 years, but I do think it's a long slog to really actually get to the point of going, wow, I'm so proud this business is really established and successful.
Yeah.
So that would be
I think
my
our
experience.
definition of success changes over time. And I think it's very important to have benchmarks that you celebrate. So, the first year is just, maybe it was to sell 300 and have 300 customers who reviewed your product. That was our circumstance. That was success, but clearly that's not going to be success today. So success will change over time. But in terms of being profitable and sustainable, they're different sorts of things. For me, my definition of success changed over time. From I used to do every single thing in the business versus having people around me to do other things. That was another level of success when you got professionals, like real people, real marketers to do real things.
I think for me, I remember being at the airport and there was 3 Carman's wrappers in the rubbish bin, and it was just this moment of like, I have made it. There's people out there. I got my phone out, I was taking photos inside the rubbish bin, and like even on the weekend my son said, oh my gosh, look in that bin, look at the Carman's wrappers, Mum. And we still had a moment over the bin. It's just there's something around the fact of going, there's real people out there who don't actually know me, who are actually handing over their money. Same with you and your product. So I think that's something that, for me, it's never been about being driven by money. It's about the pride of saying, oh wow, look how awesome this is.
Now you and I were at the grand final a few years ago together, and one of my measures for success is at Christmas time is how many MCGs worth of RedBalloon vouchers we will sell at Christmas. So how many, and I imagine all of the people, grand final day at the MCG, if they were holding their RedBalloon voucher, that's how many Christmas trees is that? What does that feel like? And it's the only way I can visualise the number of people. So you were there when I discovered that, which is kind of funny. Anyway, Melissa Brown, you've got a fabulous... Carolyn, what did your day look like in the first few years starting Carman's?
So when I first started, I would make all the products. So I was sort of the only person there with the other lady, Munya, that owned it with me. So I would literally make all the product, and then I would get home and I would pack it all off in my parents' study, and then that was on production day. And then the next day I would ring all the customers. Well, in fact, it went the other way around. I'd ring the customers, then I'd make to order, I'd pack it up, and then I'd load the back of the Daewoo, and I'd drive around and see everyone, drop the deliveries off, get the money, and then race to the bank every day to put that money in, because I needed to make sure that I could, cover the checks that I'd written.
Checks?
Yeah, those days in checks. There was no internet when I started. And I think if I could look back now and say to myself, what would I change? It was the fact that I said yes to everything, any opportunity. Someone wanted me to put pineapple chunks and chocolate pieces through music. I go, yeah, great idea. And really now I'm much smarter about how to say a graceful no and how to know what we do as opposed to what we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah. Actually, they do say that the road to success, that success is actually by the number of no's you say and what you learn to say no to, because then you can stick to your dream, your vision, your plan, versus trying to please everybody else, because you can't. And that comes back to the fundamental question of whose problem are you solving? Where are they? So come on, Caro Witter, you've got a next question for us. What would you spend more on in the early stages of starting your business, and what would you minimise spending on? Well, I'd minimise spending on the things that don't work, and I'd spend more money on the things that do work. Yes, but we don't know which ones they are. That's the trick.
So what I would say is that people think that advertising and that it's all about marketing spend. And for me, it was write your own PR release, send it at least to the local paper to start with, because they're always going to run a story about the local businesses. And then go and get 20 copies of that, laminate it, put it in all your stores, and that would be the start of actually some, little bit of PR. And then if you can start trying to get a bit of a marketing engine in whoever you think might write stories, that you can actually do for nothing yourself. And if you can then send that article to another journalist and say, they ran this here, and we will often still try and, do really smart PR angles on things. And that, like I said, it doesn't cost anything. So I would minimise that marketing spend, and I would probably maximise the spend on your actual product to make sure that it is really, like at the end of the day, the only person that matters is the consumer. And if they're happy, that's actually going to be the best word of mouth, the best ability for your business. So just don't stuff them around, because they'll only buy it once. If you have lovely packaging but a bit of a crappy product, there will be no longevity in your business if you take the money from the product and put it into the marketing.
Yeah, Caro, we're going to send you a copy of Ready to Soar, because we talk a lot about that. And Carolyn just talked about minimal viable product and getting your customers involved with the beta testing program. They might actually pay for that. They might not even realise they're part of your beta testing program. But one of the things for me was, how was I listening to customers? And we still do it. Every single person who went on a RedBalloon day, we used to call them RedBalloon days in those days, remember that, all that time ago, before it was just RedBalloon. But people used to confuse us with a charity, which is why we dropped the days, because people thought we were a charity, which we were not. So anyway, we'd send, and then we'd read every single one. So we're getting people engaged with our product and our experiences, so we knew what was going on, and then we could listen and respond and adjust. So getting customers involved, and they will tell you pretty quickly what is valuable to them, and therefore what you should be spending more money on as well. So come on, Aaron Yick, you've got a great question here. Do you have any tips or tricks for how you have managed to stay in touch with your customers' needs as you have grown your business? I think I was just talking to that about staying in touch with customers' needs. But what about you? You work through retailers and distributive models. So how do you stay in touch with customers?
So up until a few years ago, we would do it via a SurveyMonkey website. So we had a survey on the front of our website saying, tell us everything, how old you are, what magazines do you read, what radio station, and what do you think about these product flavours, and we would collect that. And we would hang off everything and thinking, well, hang on, this is how we can serve them better. And as time's gone on, that's become much more sophisticated. So we now have our own consumer panel with about 3,000 Carman's consumers. And before we do anything, before we name a product, we ask them, do you like the names in these orders, which ways? Now, when your business is little, you can do that by friends or friends of friends. It's literally trying to gather as much data and information and making sure that your decision making is really delivering to what the customers actually want. So, it has got more sophisticated, but you can certainly do it in a simpler way when you start up.
Yeah, it's funny because we've actually used Facebook in that way. So it's not a scientific research. We're just wanting to know the essence or the understanding. And I remember I have some battles with the product team of what I thought was appropriate for and what they thought was good. And we'd actually put it to the people. We'd put it to the people who subscribed to the RedBalloon webpage about the Facebook page to see what they thought. It was often insightful anyway, because we often get caught in our own bubble. We think we know everything, and actually we don't. But we wanted to take it out of the pure customer experience, because Henry Ford said, if I had have asked
people that say I wanted a faster horse.
Exactly. If I had have asked my customers, I would have asked for a faster horse. But Dina, when starting Carman's, what type of marketing did you use, and what did you find most effective to get the product to Aussie consumers? Now, we're talking about dreams today. What did you dream versus what actually happened? Yeah.
Well, I never imagined when the business was as small as it was that it would have ever been as big as today. So I guess I only ever dreamed for the next few years.
Yeah.
But early marketing was really around standing in supermarkets, getting product in mouths, trying to get as much PR as that I could, and to literally, I used to get my husband to drive me like a bank robber at night, and I'd jump out of the car and I'd run in and I'd put Uncle Toby's all on the bottom shelf, and I'd put Carman's all up at eye level, and I used to be a checkout chick, so I knew how to quickly change all the tags and make it a really, look fantastic. And I only had 20 stores to deal with, and I just run around to all those stores and make it look great. And so as time went on, luckily I was able to, the business was able to start taking off. But, in the early days, you just did what you could with what you had. And, I certainly did lots of crazy things like that.
Okay, let's go to Megan. Megan Misso. I started my wholesale business and now we have grown. What is the best way to set up your online store to target the retail market?
So you are the queen of online, so I'm not as experienced at that. What I would say is that before you actually do your own store, it's okay to support a retailer that you really like. So we've had people who sell our product online, and we will link through on our website. So when you type in to buy Carman's online, you boom straight up onto their page. So they do all the back end. And so for us, that was something that was that first step. Now, we're obviously looking at other ways of doing online moving forward, and we aren't really an online business, of the nature of what we sell. So I would say don't feel that you have to set it up from day one. You can partner with people to get there, but you've probably got more to comment on with that.
So the thing that most people don't realise is how expensive it is to get people to come to your website. It's not as simple as, putting up a little sign somewhere or putting an ad on Facebook page. Getting people to click through is really very difficult, and there's quite a science to it. So the cost of attracting a customer can often predetermine that is not the best way to deliver, as in your product, because your unit price, and if it's going to cost you $50 to attract a customer online, there is no point doing it. Different now when your brand is how it is, and people by nature want to know more about you, they want to engage in your brand, they want to engage in your story so they have a reason to go. When we first started, we launched RedBalloon before Google AdWords was invented, and when we first started bidding, we were bidding for terms, and they cost 5 cents for a term. So attracting a customer that way made sense. That same term now costs about $50. So you can see that is no longer the only way, or it's a very expensive way to get a customer. So again, you've got to kind of dance in the analytics of what is the best way to get customers. And I wouldn't necessarily, you can have an information, a portal, content, build your brand story. But as you said, there is experts at who do pick and pack and logistics, especially if you've got a physical product. So great question, but let's move to Erica. Erica Bax. Carolyn, how long did it take you to say no to people?
Far too long, I have to say, and if I could go back to my younger self, that would be my biggest tip to myself. So probably not until I had the kids, and when I had the kids, I all of a sudden had this excuse that I could say no a lot more freely. And more recently, I just read a book called Essentialism, and they had a whole chapter, it was just a small chapter on the graceful no. How to say no gracefully. You can say it with finesse, and someone sends an email in, and you would be the same. You get asked to do lots of different things, and to say, thank you so much, I really appreciate you thinking about me, but with 4 young kids, I just have to be really careful with my time, so perhaps I could do this for you this time, but please don't think it's not because I don't believe in what you're doing. And everyone has been charming and lovely, and I have to sometimes say, what's in it for me with this certain situation? And sometimes you're a giver, and I've got an open heart, and I'm a giver as you are, and sometimes you do have to say, but how will I feel about this on the day that I'm having to go and do this? And whether it's in your business sense of what things you're going to do in your business world, or in your personal life and what things you're going to do, really just thinking, is this the best way for me to spend my time? And being a little bit precious about that.
I think it's really important because it's what you say no to is actually going to create your success. But it literally, if I accepted every coffee that I was asked to, every idea that somebody wanted to pitch, every charity that somebody wanted me to go, I don't have any time. And you know, it is quite interesting that in all of these years where people have asked me to mentor them, all the rest, not one person, well, I shouldn't say that, there's only one person who's ever offered to do something for me. And that, a gorgeous person who's probably watching now, they said, I'd really like to buy you a coffee. How many requests do we get a week for coffee? Which is, but he said, and I know I want to do something for you, and I'm really happy to make a donation to the Cerebral Palsy Alliance for you because I understand that you're a governor there. And it was the only person, and he did. And it was the only person who's ever done anything to say thank you. So, you know, at some point, we run out of batteries. There's only so much time.
And what I would also say is that life goes around in circles, and sometimes it's, you know, pay it forward. And so that I look at the people that helped me, and I think that was amazing. And I'm really careful when I'm asking people for help of just being really tight about, I just want to ask you this question. You know, I had an amazing person on the phone from China for me today who was, you know, running $1 billion business, and someone had organised for him to do it. You know, and he offered me an hour of his time, and I was conscious. I got all my questions out and did it in 20 minutes because I was really conscious of, you know, this is so kind that you're actually helping me. So just always be really conscious of what you're asking someone for, and don't waste their time, you know, and be really grateful and thankful afterwards.
But both you and I, both of us share what we've learned because we're both part of the B School program.
We are.
So we're mentors, and we're really happy for people to learn. I mean, I guess that's why I've written books as well. So it's not as if we don't give away what we know or we share it with others. And really, if you do want mentoring, have a look at B School, sign up, see what we both do, because it's the school of entrepreneurship that we're both involved with, and you end up with a diploma of business. So we haven't got time for many more questions. We might be able to squeeze in 3 more. But Anna Cassandra, what would you do differently if you had to start over again? Maybe that would be educate ourselves. I wish there was a B School when we were growing up.
I have to say, I would have loved that because I was self-taught. I had no background in business, and you know, some of that things like, you know, what B School teaches you about how to read a P&L and a balance sheet, and you know, and I'd still come back to that sense of what to say yes and no to, so that you could actually really narrow down to what's the best way to constantly be better tomorrow than you were yesterday. So just constantly tweak, and I'm always trying to tweak in my personal life, and every January I write a list.
Do you
of
have
all
like productivity hacks? Is
no,
that
no,
what
no. I say all little things like, this is what I'd like to do in all aspects of my life. So, you know, for example, last year I wanted to learn how to just play chess. And so, you know, I thought all my kids play chess, and I feel like a loser. I don't know even what the pieces do. And so all year I think, oh, whenever I have an opportunity, I'm going to work on that. And I laminate it and I put it in my shower. And each morning I think, oh, have I worked on any of these things? So this year I want to sort all my digital photos into some form of order. They're tiny little things, but when it gets to the end of the year, you go, wow, I've like plugged away on a few of these little things. So,
what is your module in B School, by the way?
Under product.
Oh, you're under product?
Yes.
Oh,
so
I do branding.
Oh, well
there. Yeah, who would have thought it? Okay, Melissa Bowen, in the first 5 years of your Carman's journey, how much time did you put into gaining new clients and wholesalers? Well, isn't that what we do as entrepreneurs?
Yes.
I would say it was 100% of mine was getting customers.
Yeah, it would be probably 90%.
Yeah,
You know, look, there's still obviously business to run. Unfortunately, I kind of had no money, and things were really tough for me financially. For the first 5 years, I was having my brother siphon petrol out of my mum's car when she wasn't looking, and doing all sort of crazy things to think, how could I survive the days? But as time went on, you know, yeah, she's fine, she's forgiven me. But as time went on, you know, really you'd say to yourself, it's a numbers game. So if in 100 new customers I approach, I'm only going to get 1 in 2, that's 50 customers. And if I know that by the end of the year I need 50 new customers, that means that every week I have to approach 4 people, and I'd make sure that every day that's the first phone call I made. And so you just kind of look at your numbers and just learn how to analyse them to say what's working and what's not. So for me, I learned very quickly that my number 1 clients were butchers. Who would have thought? Muesli and butchers. But butchers, people spend more money buying meat, so I would all of a sudden I looked at the data and went, I've got to really target butchers because they're going to be, you know, an easy win for me. So you've got to be constantly reassessing what's working and what's not, so that you can sort of keep moving forward.
That's great. And let's send a copy out. We're fast running out of time. But Talia and Maria and Real, how has social media helped your business in terms of brand and recognition in product and sales?
Look, I have to say, social media is not a huge part of our business. You know, it's become more tricky. You know, even with Facebook, things that you used to be able to feed something and it would go to all of your followers, and now it will go to, you know, I think it's minimum 16% of your followers. So you do have to pay to have a post that goes to everyone that is following you. So I do think you have to be cautious of only building a business that has the social media aspect, because it moves and the rules change. I think it's one aspect of your brand, but there's lots of aspects of your brand, and don't just hang on to one. You know, do think about all of the other pillars and make sure you give each one a little bit of love.
Yeah. When I launched RedBalloon, there was no such thing as social media, so it wasn't a big part of our strategy, you know, literally. Okay, we're coming up for a last question from Christy. How much time do you invest in your retailers to ensure that they keep your product on the shelves?
So and you know, this is no secret, I say to my retailers, you are the same as us at Carman's, as the employees of Carman's. We are all servants to the customer. So the number one thing I care about is the person that walks down the aisle with their trolley and sees Carman's and puts it in the trolley and goes and actually hands their $5 over and buys the packet. The retailers are just a vehicle to make stuff happen. The employees at Carman's, we're just vehicles. We are all just the only stakeholder we have is the customer. So if the customer is happy and they come in week out and they want to buy the product, that's what the retailers want. That makes their job easier and happen, and that's what pays all the salaries at Carman's, and that's what means that our suppliers are happy, because there's plenty of big orders going through the packaging company. So if at the end of the day, if there's one thing you can take away from, I don't know, my story, is if you are totally customer focused, everything else will take care of itself. But just genuinely listen, and don't think you know what they want, and honestly watch how they behave, not what they say they might do. It's actually what they do, and then constantly tweak and try and deliver something better to them tomorrow than you did yesterday. And that really, to me, is probably the key to our success.
I completely concur. RedBalloon, of course, is a two-sided marketplace. So we had to put just as much energy into the people who are delivering the experiences as the customers, because they too had a choice of whether they were going to list with us or not. So giving them the same amount of love, listening to them, giving them the tools that they needed to be able to live on our brand promise, and then always listening to the customers and joining the two by having a constant feedback loop. And it's never done. It's never finished, and that's the one thing about the customer journey. You actually never get to the end. There's no such thing. You know, tonight we were talking about dreams, and you know, one of the most daunting things that I've had to do ever, I think, was when my son's school asked me to speak at one of their end of year functions. And you know, I really wanted to leave them with something that was very important and powerful, you know, that they might take on their journey with them. So I said, you know, there's three things that you really need in life. There's three things. You need a wishbone. You need to have a dream, an aspiration. But you need a backbone to make sure you deliver and you get things going. And you need to take risks and have courage. But the final thing is, and I think you've seen that here with Carolyn and I tonight, is you also need a funny bone, because if you're not having a laugh, it's a really long journey. So think about that, those three things. But it's time to say goodbye. Thank you so much. Do tune in again in September, and you'll see me again interviewing another great entrepreneur on Facebook Live on the ANZ page. Hit the subscribe button. Do remember, if I've offered you a copy of Ready to Soar tonight, write into us on the direct inbox into ANZ on the Facebook page, and they'll send it out to you. But Carolyn, how great of ANZ to sort out for us to have a catch up, which is absolutely fabulous. So delightful to see, and you know, wow, what a journey.
Thank you. Thanks.